Yanji Chembor Jordan Hingmi Jang Zonel Monum Chembor Ngabjata, Bakar Targam Zanto Shermando, Stumba Tuje Janla Gisham Zor, only General Sergi Jangams, Jabur Tujishan, the Yalarman. Jimmy Panzo Jala Soran de Gorgeto Bampor Shinji Lo.
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons, and now see it here, receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us continue with our class on the Mahayana Surangama Sutra. The Surangama Sutra, I think by now you're very clear on how profound this sutra is, on the profundity of the method of meditation or on the application. This particular teaching is given to all of us through the conversations the conversations the Buddha had between Ananda and Arhats and Bodhisattvas. Through the conversation, through various examples, and through various explanations, the Buddha then expounded the teaching of the nature of mind being the union of emptiness and luminosity. Therefore, I think all of you who are sitting here attending this class, by having this opportunity to listen to such a supreme teaching, you must have had accumulated a great amount of merit, and this is the fruition of it. Otherwise, I don't think you'll be able to encounter such a supreme sutra. Though I am just an ordinary monk, to whom giving you the teaching on this Supreme Sutra, but we're entering into the particular scene that was 2,500 years ago during the time of the Buddha. And we have such fortune to witness the conversation between the Buddha and the Noble Ones. Therefore, we must be very fortunate. I understand that we're still trapped in samsara. We can say that we have lots of afflictions and a great deal of negative karma, and we're very much tethered by all kinds of our karmic forces and our afflictions, and we don't have the true freedom yet. But acknowledging that we're living in this dark age and being fettered by all of that, yet we encounter the supreme teaching, I believe we ought to generate great happiness and great joy from the bottom of our hearts. Now let's continue with the teaching of Surangama Sutra. Previously, in our classes, we've already covered that the nature of mind, though Ananda kept on thinking that there is something solidly existent as the sea nature. And then the Buddha kept on giving various examples and expounding the teaching to Ananda through various ways to demonstrate that the same nature is not something that is solid, it's not something that is graspable. After saying that, Ananda, as well as many of the noble ones in the assembly that have not attained the stage of no learning, they were completely confused. They were very much dazed, they didn't know what to do, and started to feeling a bit anxious. And then the Buddha compassionately consoled them, saying that, oh, don't be afraid. If you don't understand, that's okay. Just as long as you understand that the Buddha is the one who speaks the truth and only truth, does not lie or deceive. as long as you know that, then it is not going to be harmful to you. Now to continue, Manjushri appears. Previously, we already saw that during the conversation of the Buddha and Ananda, King Pasenadi also stood up and started to speak. And then at the time when the Buddha was giving the teaching to Ananda, and when the Great Assembly received the teaching, they were very anxious and confused. The Supreme Bodhisattva of Wisdom, the Manjushri Bodhisattva, stood up. We know that Manjushri is the foremost of wisdom, and in the Hinayana tradition, the foremost in wisdom is Shariputra, and foremost in miraculous actions is Moggallana, and in Mahayana tradition, the foremost in wisdom is Manjushri, because he completely understood emptiness, which surpassed all of the Shravaka practitioners. Therefore, it is necessary for Manjushri to appear and join into the conversation. During the conversations between the Buddha and his disciples, especially whenever there are some profound teachings being expounded, usually Shubhati would appear, or sometimes Manjushri. So let's look at what Manjushri is talking about. Then Manjushri, son of the Dharma king, took pity on the four assemblies, rose from his seat in the midst of the great assembly, bowed at the Buddha's feet, placed his palms together respectfully, and said to the Buddha, "World-honored one." So he started to address the Buddha. In fact, the Dharma heir, the Dharma prince Manjushri, though he appears in such a way as a youthful prince, but we know that many Buddhas, including Shakyamuni Buddha, they had made aspiration in front of Manjushri Bodhisattva in their past lives. But Manjushri always benefited everyone and all sentient beings with the form of a youth prince. At that time, this Dharma prince took pity upon the four assemblies, the four assemblies being bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, upasaka, and upasikas. So he stood up and then addressed the Buddha by saying that a world-honored one, the great assembly, has not awakened to the principle of the thus come one's twofold disclosure of the essence of seeing as being both form and emptiness, and as being neither of them. What are the two folds of exposures then? That is the essence of seeing and form and emptiness. The essence of seeing, we've already discussed this before, it is the nature of mind, and they are translated as essence of seeing in this particular Chinese translation. It is luminous and it is unconditioned. Sometimes we call it awareness or rigpa. This is the essence of seeing. And he said that this form emptiness, which is everything, all phenomena, all the external objects such as sound, touch, smell, fragrance, and so on and so forth. Those are the objects. Previously, all the assembly had this confusion about the essence of seeing and the objects. Are they of one thing or not? What's the condition? What's the connection between them? So the essence of seeing and form emptiness, are they of one thing or are they not? Are they all essence of seeing or are they all form emptiness? Because we know that the assembly, including Ananda, at that time, they were still at the state of conceptual thinking, and they had not entered into the wisdom state. That state is similar to materialistic view of, for example, the kind of view that we share nowadays quite pervasively, or the Sabbhativada school according to the Hinayana vehicle. So they would search for something that is graspable. Therefore, they cannot fathom something that is unfathomable. It is quite far away and so unattainable to them. But according to Sutra, it says that if you can attain something, if you can attain the characteristic as being something, then it is consciousness. If you can attain the characteristic, that is the wisdom. Therefore, they're still at the state of such a kind of mental consciousness state. At that time, they don't understand the essence of seeing and object. What are the relationship? What's the relationship between the two? The Manjushri Bodhisattva at that time then further expounded on this particular topic. Manjushri at the time expounded in such a way by saying that, world-honored one, if the causal form, emptiness, and other phenomena mentioned above were the seeing, there should be an indication of its distance. So there's a way to point to it. And if they were not the seeing, there should be nothing visible to be seen. So all the things that appears right in front of us, the phenomena, the objects to be seen, as well as all the form emptiness. The form emptiness, according to some commentary, it says that it is the phenomena. Some explained as the ones that has form and without form, or conditioned and unconditioned. There are different ways of explaining this form emptiness. Anyhow, it says that whatever phenomena that's right in front of us, the objects to be perceived, to be seen, if they would be perceived, if we can see them, then we definitely should be able to point to it. Just like a vase, a pillar. Then you should be able to point it out. If the seeing nature or seeing essence is like so, like the form emptiness, you should also be able to point out the seeing essence. And if they were not the seeing, there should be nothing visible to be seen. So if there is nothing to be seen, then they're not part of the domain of our seeing nature. They're just like the child of a barren woman or the horn of a rabbit. But you shouldn't come to that kind of recognition, because people still would say that there is something to be seen. There is an object. So over here, Manjushri basically readdressed these two controversial questions and represented the group of people who were very confused to ask this question again. And then he continued to say that now that we do not know what is meant, and this is why we are alarmed and concerned. Manjushri over here said that while this group of disciples, especially Ananda, still do not understand what this seeing nature is, and their main concern is that they cannot point to something if there is something to be seen. So they don't understand that yet. And then, since there's nothing to be pointed to as the seeing nature, and they're still perceivable, they're still seen by the seeing nature. Therefore, this group of people get very confused and alarmed. This is the question that represents lots of our mundane beings' view. A lot of times we feel that the seeing nature, this awareness, it feels like it is existent, but sometimes we feel that it can be existent. There is something there, but we can't point to it. And then at that time, we would feel a little bit alarmed about our practice. Or we would start to doubt, is that really the nature that I have already seen? Is that really the seeing nature? So we would have doubts and then feel alarmed and feel doubtful about our practice. And then Manjushri continued to say that it is not that our good roots from the former lives are deficient. So Manjushri said that, well, the disciples must feel quite alarmed right now and feel doubtful. And the disciples, because they feel alarmed and a bit scared even, they may then think that it is because their virtuous roots is not sufficient. According to the commentary of Finger and Palm, it says that many people, after listening to the teaching of Avatamsaka Sutra, many would fall fainted. And on the great assembly of listening to the teaching on the Vaipoya Sutra, then they would also feel a sense of inconceivable and feel quite alarmed and couldn't accept the teaching of the Vaipoya Sutra. So Manjushri over here addressed the Buddha saying that there are people who had not accumulated enough meritorious roots, then they might not be able to receive, or they might not be able to receive this teaching or accept this kind of teaching because their insights have not attained to that level yet. And then Manjushri continued to address the Buddha, saying that we only hope that thus come one will have the great compassion to reveal exactly what all the things are and what the seeing nature is. The external objects and the seeing nature, what's the relation between the two? What is it? So what exactly is this seeing nature? Is it that there is no question of is or is not in all of this? Since we cannot find it, then is it or is it not the same thing? Because the disciples feel quite confused. It is very ambiguous between is existent and is not existent. So the seeing nature and the external object, are they of the same characteristic or are they not? This is quite crucial to understand. As mundane beings, I think our mindset is very much like the description in the Beacon of Certainty composed by Mipa Rinpoche, where he said that we constantly feel that the union means a black rope twisted together with a white rope. It's the two things twisted together. This is how the mundane beings perceive union, the idea of union. So when it comes to seeing the true nature of mind, they constantly feel that there is something truly existent, or they feel that there is not something that's truly existent. It's very easy to fall into the two extremes. Within the very narrow conceptual mind of the ordinary beings, it's very difficult to understand, to come to the realization of wisdom. And we're constantly measuring the space with the unit of an eye of a needle. Then that is why Manjushri at the time again repeated the question of Ananda and then requested the great compassionate Buddha to expound the teaching to the great assembly, saying that what is the connection between seeing nature and the object? In fact, between the seeing nature and the object, there is really nothing separate, but this is not understood by Ananda. I think we also feel the same way. We're very confused in the similar way to Ananda. Sometimes we feel that, the object is a support for our mind. Sometimes we also, according to the sutras, feel that, yes, everything is created by mind. Sometimes we feel that the objects are the conditions, and based on these conditions, then there's the eye consciousness and so on. And then the consciousness comes in from the second moment onwards, especially according to Vinaya Sutra. However, whenever it comes to our own insight, if we have not attained to that stage of the inconceivable stage, then we will not be able to be liberated from this seemingly conflictive state of mind. And then the Buddha compassionately started to address Ananda and Manjushri's question and expounded his teaching. This particular teaching given by the Buddha is the real answer to address this question, and we should contemplate upon it. At that time, the Buddha told Manjushri and the great assembly, to the thus come ones and the great bodhisattvas of the 10 directions who dwell in the samadhi, seeing the conditions of seeing, as well as the characteristics of thought, are like flowers in space, fundamentally non-existent. Over here, the Buddha very compassionately replied to Manjushri and Ananda by saying that the bodhisattvas of all directions and the great bodhisattvas, as well as those who abide in samadhi, which is the self-nature samadhi, Surangama Samadhi. Surangama, because the title of the sutra, Surangama Sutra, is named after the name of this particular samadhi. So it says that all of those who abide in this samadhi, their seeing and the condition of seeing, as well as all the characteristic of thoughts, are just like flowers in space. Now, a key point has been expounded quite clearly to us. To the great bodhisattvas and the Buddhas who abide in samadhis like such, they attain a state like that. However, for all of us who are simply mundane beings and have not attained any of the fruition nor abide in the state of such supreme samadhis, it must be very difficult for us to attain such kind of realization. In their perception, one is seeing and the other one is the condition of seeing. In terms of seeing, there are a few different explanations. Master Changshui's explanation is that the seeing is consciousness and the condition of seeing is the root. So the root and consciousness, as well as the characteristic of thoughts, those are objects. Therefore, the seeing should be immediate preceding condition, and the condition of seeing is the focal condition, which is reliant on our roots. All of the objective phenomena are imputed, therefore they are considered as dominant condition. So all of those that's gathered together are no other than the flowers blossoming in space. According to Master Jihuan, his explanation is a bit different. He said that the seeing is the root and the condition of the seeing is the object. The characteristic of thoughts is the consciousness. So he said that the seeing is the eyes, which is root, and the condition of seeing is seeing the external phenomena, which is the observe or focal conditions. I think these two explanations can be explained together or can be understood together. Anyhow, these are the two potential explanations that's available in the commentary. It is says that the external phenomena and the root and the consciousness and all of that is gathered are just like the flowers in space. In the 6th chapter, it also talks about how the seeing and the hearing are just like an illusion. And cataracts, the 3 realms are just like flowers in space. There is nothing solidly existent. This is quite an important verse in the sutra. At that time, Buddha started addressing Manjushri and the great 4 assemblies. He said that whatever we see, we hear, whatever that's gathered by our roots and consciousness, in fact, they had never even occurred. Are there flowers that blossom? Are there flowers blossoms in the sky, in the space? Are there gardens that set in the space? No, it had never even appeared. It had never occurred. Therefore, it is without birth. Since it is without birth, it is without death. So all of that's imputed, or the essence of seeing, or the object, all the phenomena, in fact, they had never appeared. They're no other than flowers in space. When one abides in samadhi, in fact, none of them ever existed. So when we are in that samadhi, let it be happiness or unhappiness, let it be good or bad, external phenomena, let it be any kinds of dualistic thoughts. In the nature, in that state of samadhi, in that state of wisdom of samadhi had never occurred. Therefore, this is such an important term to remember. It's a key. And then the Buddha continued to say that this seeing and its conditions are originally the wonderful, pure, bright substance of Bodhi. The seeing and the condition of seeing, the seeing, which is the essence of our seeing, and the condition of our seeing, which is the external adventitious things, they are no other than the pure, bright substance of Bodhi. The bright substance of Bodhi is translated as Dharmakaya in the Tibetan translation. In some of the commentaries in the Chinese language, they also explained it as the Dharmakaya. So let it be the external phenomena or the mind consciousness. In fact, they are simply all pure. They are no other than Bodhi. They're just the play of a Dharmakaya. According to the treasury of the natural state, it says that it is simply an adornment, is simply of a wondrous force, a manifestation. Though they appear as something that's external, however, they're simply a manifestation of the inner Dharmakaya. Other than that, there is no substance that's to it. So I think the teaching is very similar to that. So how can one speak of is and is not? In this kind of object phenomena that is like a flower in space, how could you say that there is or is not this seeing essence and this object, this consciousness and not consciousness? How can you differentiate it like that? In the great Mahāti realization, everything is no other than the play of awareness, than the nature of mind, the gnosis. So there is no way to obtain something that is a consciousness that is solidly existent and that is not existent. Just as in the pure continent that's made of only gold, how can you get ordinary rocks? There is no way to obtain that. And then the Buddha continued to give an example by saying that, Manjushri, I now ask you, take yourself as an example, Manjushri. Is there still another Manjushri? Is there a Manjushri who is and a Manjushri who is not? So the Buddha asked the Manjushri saying that, let me ask you a question. Is there another Manjushri? If there's another Manjushri, then is that Manjushri a Manjushri or not a Manjushri? If you do not understand this question, you probably would be very confused. What kind of question is that? But the Buddha, in fact, is standing at the highest level of his realization to expound the true Manjushri. That is his angle of explanation. Conventionally speaking, you cannot say that it is or it is not Manjushri. They're both wrong. But when it comes to the Manjushri being the true Manjushri of the absolute truth, then the true Manjushri is no other than one's nature of mind. After asking in such a way, the Buddha asked, well, so the Manjushri, is it Manjushri or is it not? Because you cannot find the contradictory nature of the characteristic on you. Therefore, the Buddha pointed out the nature of mind through giving the example of asking Manjushri. He's saying that is the true Manjushri. Does the true Manjushri has a Manjushri and not a Manjushri, the two things at the same time? Manjushri, of course, he's extremely smart. He said that, so it is, world honored one. I am truly Manjushri. There is no Manjushri who is. Why? If there were still another Manjushri who is Manjushri, there would be two Manjushris. But it is not that. Now that I am not Manjushri, in fact, neither of the two characteristics of it and is not exist. The answer that Manjushri gives to the Buddha is the true Manjushri of Dharmakaya Manjushri. This absolute Manjushri of the Dharmakaya Manjushri cannot be expounded by hypothesis or based on our conceptualization. This unconditioned Manjushri doesn't have a Manjushri, because if you were to say there is a Manjushri, then there is not a Manjushri. In that way, there would be two Manjushris. But it is not that now I am not Manjushri. In fact, neither of the two characteristics of is and it is not exist. This not a Manjushri doesn't mean that there is no Manjushri. That is the view of voidness. That is not possible. So in the conventional truth, we cannot say that there is no Manjushri. We can say that. Therefore, in that state of realization, there is no dualism of is and is not, because he is in that absolute state of realization. Ponsuk Rinpoche, when he was given teaching at Mount Wutai, he composed a Doha song. I can't remember it too clearly, but I remember the gist of it. He said that the naturally existent Manjushri within oneself is not known to one. Therefore, one would spend lots of effort in searching for Manjushri, without knowing the nature. One's nature is Manjushri himself, whom had never parted from one.
对，大概是这个意思吧。就是其实，当时上师如意宝在那个五台山的这个文殊大圆满也好，然后呢，就是有一个那个。
Manjushri Satna that he composed over there, as well as the Tantra that's related to Manjushri, and a few Doha songs that he composed over there at Mount Wutai. They all expounded on the teaching of the absolute Manjushri, which has never parted from oneself, just as the peaceful sadhana practice of Manjushri within the refuge and aspiration. It stated the content in such a way where it says that the true Manjushri had never parted from one. So this Manjushri, in fact, the absolute Manjushri has surpassed that of is and is not. It is not part of our dualistic mind that can comprehend. The Manjushri, sometimes we can only comprehend as a phenomenal Manjushri, the appearance of Manjushri, but not the true Manjushri. According to the Five Lamps Zen text, there is a story that's included where Zen master, Master Fenggan, whom wanted to travel to Mount Wutai, and he asked the Master Shida to travel with him. But Master Shida said that, why do you want to go there? Master Fenggan said that, I want to go there to pay homage to Manjushri. And Master Shida said that, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to accompany you on that pilgrimage. Therefore, Master Fenggan went there by himself. When he arrived, he saw an old man, and then Master Fenggan asked, are you Manjushri? The old man replied, what is a Manjushri? And then Master Fenggan started to prostrate to him. After he prostrated to that old man, the old man disappeared. But that story didn't continue. Not so sure. So at this point, you're probably quite confused. What's the point of this story? In fact, many commentaries by the Zen masters did not continue to expound further about this particular story, didn't really explain it. But from my understanding, I think we can understand it from two aspects. One is that since we're aware that Master Fenggan is considered as the manifestation of Amitabha, and Master Hanshan is considered as the manifestation of Manjushri. Therefore, when Master Fenggan asked the Master Hanshan to pay homage to Mount Wutai, then as Manjushri himself, he didn't really want to go. That's understandable. On the other hand, there's another level of understanding, which is Master Fengshan, when he went to Mount Wutai, he didn't seek for any other Manjushri, but when he encountered an old man, he then recognized that is Manjushri himself, because when he arrived at Mount Wutai, he had already seen his true absolute Manjushri, which is his own nature. So his own nature is Manjushri, is Samanabhadra, is the Buddha, is the luminous, unconditioned awareness, is the gnosis. This is quite important. So the Manjushri can be understood in such ways, and the Manjushri is presented in the story as allegories. But in the conventional sense, of course, you won't be able to understand it from the level of understanding of Ananda. Manjushri is Manjushri. You cannot say that there are two Manjushris. But once you understand the absolute truth from the level of realization that is beyond our conception, then we will be able to see the nature of our absolute mind, which is the true Manjushri. At that time, you'll be able to see that the true Manjushri is beyond is and is not. And then the Buddha continued to expound to Manjushri by saying that this is not only the case with the seeing, the basic substance of wonderful Bodhi, but also with emptiness and mundane objects. So the Buddha continued to say that whatever you see are no other than the luminous are no other than the luminosity. It could be seeing essence or the gnosis or the nature of mind. So between the seeing of the nature to that of the empty objects or empty dust, maybe the empty dust means the external or adventitious things, and it is translated in such a way could be because of the original Sanskrit is written this way, or it could be for the beauty of the Chinese language. Not so sure why it's translated in such ways, and not sure why there are so many different terms that's used to describe the same thing. Sometimes we see the essence of seeing, sometimes we see the seeing of the nature, sometimes we see that it's empty dust, sometimes it is the form emptiness, sometimes it's the external object. There are many different terms to describe the same thing. But in fact, it says that the luminous mind and the external objects are the same. Just as the true Manjushri doesn't have two particular dualistic characteristics, the mind and objects are of no other in the absolute truth. There are no dualism. According to the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, the conversation between Manjushri or expounded by Manjushri also talks about such non-dual teaching. In the Lotus Sutra, there's also teachings like that. But of course, to all of us as the mundane beings, we have to look for good and bad, right and wrong, white and black, and so on and so forth. But in the non-dual teachings, they often talk about the object and the subject, the good and bad, and the existent or not, the high and lows. All of those are simply illusions. But we often feel that the black and white, the right and wrong, they have to have some kind of solid existence. There must be a true existence to it, but there is not. So over here, the Buddha said that the seeing and the object or the projection or manifestation of the wonderful brightness of the unsurpassed Bodhi, the pure, perfect, true mind, they are falsely taken to be form and emptiness as well as hearing and seeing. The Bodhi that is wondrous, that is bright, and that is supreme, it has already, we already have them. This perfect nature is already there without birth and death. This is the true Supreme Bodhi. It is without any fault. It is completely pure. We already have such a mind like that. But because of our ignorance, because of the external conditions, and then at the end, they're falsely taken to be form and emptiness, because we take that they have, we falsely take them to have characteristics, and then because we grasp onto them as characteristics, then we started to have the seeing and hearing. The Buddha then continued to say that just as with the second moon, which one is the moon and which one is not the moon? Manjushri. This means that our true mind, this gnosis, in fact, doesn't have all of these dualistic differentiations, but because of our ignorance, such kind of illusion started to manifest in our object, in our objective phenomena. Just as the two moons or the falsely perceived hair because of cataracts and all kinds of illness, those kinds of illusions would manifest. In fact, they don't exist at all, but they can manifest. And then the Buddha said that Manjushri, there is only one true moon, and within it there is not a moon that is, or a moon that is not. This example points to the nature of our mind. It's not saying, though the example is pointing to the moon, but it is not to say that the moon is solidly existent or not. That's not the point of it. Rather, the true moon points to the true nature of our mind. Just as the beacon of certainty says that the true moon and the water moon and the moon that a moon that is painted or drawn, those are the various kinds of levels of realization to the noble ones. To see the nature of mind, at that time there are the three examples associated with that. The true moon, which is the nature of our mind, that is the true pure moon. And the Supreme Bodhi. But with this condition, there could be the manifestation of the two moons. Out of the two moons, can you say which one is the real moon and which one is not? You cannot find any of those. Therefore, you cannot say which one is and which one is not. Therefore, now, as you contemplate on the seeing and the mundane things together, all the things you disclose are called false thoughts. You cannot transcend is and is not from within them. All kinds of illusions and manifestations are simply the false thoughts. They're simply illusions. And because they're false thoughts, therefore you cannot transcend the state of is and is not. You won't be able to reach to the state of unconceivable. With the true essence, the wonderful enlightened bright nature, you can get beyond trying to point out or not point out. And then the Buddha started to expound on the true mind, the essence, the wonderful enlightened bright nature, the true essence. The Dharmakaya can let you surpass the pointing out or not pointing out. Master Chang Shui's commentary said that pointing means seeing, and not pointing means not seeing, which means that once you recognize the true nature of your own mind, at that time, you don't have to grasp onto anything, and then you can part from the level of insight that is bound to seeing and not seeing, because it is beyond seeing and not seeing, which is inconceivable. Some of the masters often would be bound to the words, and then they won't be able to understand the meaning which is of one taste. It is similar to those academic scholars. They would have a fixation on for example, a time of a certain person. This person was born in so-and-so years and died in so-and-so years. If the numbers were not correct, then they would start having lots of doubts. On one hand, I think the scientific research do require that mind of doubts. So they constantly doubt everything and then continuously to explore. On one hand, they rely on that doubt. On the other, they constantly search for something that is certain. And then the more they search and the more they observe, they will be able to find more evidence which could overturn their previous opinion, where they thought it was completely certain, completely unbreakable. But then maybe because of the maturation of the tools, of the resources, of the wisdom, the previously proven results would be overturned. Anyhow, I think whenever it comes to the kind of people who would grasp onto words, would grasp onto something as an evidence, let it be people who works in the scientific world or academic world, I think if you constantly grasp onto some solid evidence, then this teaching would be very difficult for you to imagine. It would be completely too unfathomable. So we've already covered on the part of seeing is not separate.
Now
the next one is seeing transcends the ordinary. We can get into this one a little bit as well. Then Ananda said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, it is truly, as the Dharma King has said, the condition of enlightenment pervades the 10 directions, clear, everlasting, and by nature neither produced nor extinguished." After Manjushri requested teaching from the Buddha then expounded such a profound teaching. Therefore, later, whenever you have time, I really hope that you can contemplate upon this teaching, because this particular teaching given by the Buddha to Manjushri is full of blessings and is quite touching. We have received such profound teaching from the Buddha. How fortunate we are. This is so important than anything in this world. So I hope that you can spend some time to contemplate upon it. The great masters of the past, they would usually listen and study the Dharma during the day and spend their evenings in contemplation. I once read a biography of a great master where it says that when he was studying in schools, he didn't have those lamps. Therefore, he would study during the day, and in the evening, before the day comes, he would keep his eyes closed and contemplate on the teaching in his head, so that he could understand the teaching completely. Therefore, now, since we have the time, we have the conditions to study during the day as well as the night, but sometimes maybe out of different conditions that you don't want to read, you don't want to keep your eyes open, then you can close your eyes and then contemplate in your mind and slowly digest all of the information that you've received during the day. This is quite important to merge yourself into the teaching of the Dharma. Instead of searching with our eyes and our conception, our dualistic mind, why not to merge into the true gnosis? Because the power of the true gnosis is much more supreme. Ananda over here said that, world-honored one, it is truly as the Dharma King has said. The condition of enlightenment pervades the 10 directions, clear, everlasting, and by nature neither produced nor extinguished. The condition of enlightenment, there are a few different explanations. According to Master Jiao Guang, he said that this condition means all the phenomena. And another master, he pointed out that the condition actually points to Bodhi, and the enlightenment is Bodhi, and then condition means all the empty forms and the seeing and hearing. Master Tongli, then he said that the condition of enlightenment is the seeing nature, but in the Tibetan translation, it is the condition of gnosis. So they are of the parallel relation in this particular sentence. But I think we can understand it as seeing the nature. Over here, Ananda said that, well, since the Buddha just stated that the seeing pervades all 10 directions, then from the worldly point of view, it is clear, everlasting, and by nature neither produced nor extinguished. How does it differ then from the first Brahma, Kalipa's teaching of the profound truth, or from the teaching of ascetics who throw ashes on themselves, or from the other externalist sects that say there is a real self which pervades the 10 directions? This particular Brahma Kapila, was mentioned in another story related to Ananda. If you remember, Ananda was taken by this Matangi woman, and then this Matangi woman's mother started to chant the mantra of Brahma Kapila. He is part of the school of Samkhya, Indian philosophical school, which is a heretic school. And then some of the description says that he has golden hair. In his teachings, he talks about the truth, the profound truth. So out of the 25 truths, the first truth of permanent existence is self. According to the Samkhya heretic teaching, they would say that the self that is constantly existent. And then there's another heretic school that is called the Basman school. They would cover themselves in ashes in order to practice. They purposely practice the ascetic practices such as walking on thorns and lying in thorn bushes, also burning themselves, and so on. That's a part of the Aslaka ascetic school. Their practices are quite difficult. So according to their school, such as the Aslaka school or the Samkhya school, they practice in such a way, or they propagate the teachings of permanent existence in such a way. Out of all the heretic schools, some of them, they would say that there is a true self that exists and pervades all 10 directions. So in the commentary, it says that there are a few of the different heretics that's mentioned. One is Samkhya, and the other one is Basman, and then the Aslaka school. They would all claim that there is a true existent self. There is the big self, the small self, the uncertain self. According to the commentary of Fingers and Palm, it says that the so-called big self is all pervasive over the 10 directions. So Ananda said that, well, since you said that the condition of enlightenment is all pervasive over the 10 directions, that is exactly the same teaching to the Samkhya school. Then what's the difference? When we say that the awareness is all pervasive to the 10 directions versus the heretics who talk about the permanent self is all pervasive over the 10 directions. And then he continued to say that, how does it differ then from the first Brahma Kapila's teaching of the profound truth, from the teaching of the ascetic who throw ashes to themselves from the other externalist sects to say that it is a real self which pervades the 10 directions? That's the question asked. Also, in the past, the world-honored one gave a lecture on Mount Lanka. Mount Lanka, sometimes in the Chinese language, sometimes Lanka. It's up to you how you want to pronounce it. Anyhow, when the world-honored one gave a lecture on Mount Lanka, explaining all the principles thoroughly for the sake of great wisdom, bodhisattva, and others,
如楞伽经里面呢，就是说是你当时说是这个外道的话呢，
At that time,
就是他们
the
就是
Buddha
经常呢
said that
就是承
the
认一种自然的
externalists
就是
in
就
their
是这
sects,
种
they
自然的
always
这个
speak
我。
of
然后我
spontaneity.
所
I
应
speak
缘
of
就是
cause
然
and
后佛陀
conditions,
你自己
which
呢，就
is
是说
an
是我的
entirely
这种这
different
个我呢，
principle.
实际上是因
The
缘法，
teaching
就是
of
因缘
this
法。
part
因为
that's
如果这个不
given,
是因缘法的话呢，就
the
是那就
teaching
是
that's
像龟
given
毛
by the
图就
world
一样的，
honor
就是
one
不
at
合
Mount
理的，就是
Lanka
当
is
时如楞伽
in
经当中
the
是有
Lankavatara
非
Sutra.
比境界，
Whenever
不
you
是
have
他
time,
们
you
的这
can
个
read
境
into
界，
it.
就是那
So
么
the Buddha
这我
used
们
to
说的
teach
这个
on
因缘
the
法呢，指的是
heretics.
这个因缘
They
二
always
因缘
speak of
二灭的，就是这个
spontaneity,
道理呢，
but
就是
the
合理
Buddha
的，就是你
teaches
当时
on
是在
everything
如楞伽
arises
经
from
当中呢，
causes
就是
and
说是
conditions,
外道是
which
这
is
个自
completely
然就是
different.
这么一个常我，就是便于一切的。而我
So
们佛
the
教的话呢，就是
heretics
都
would
是一
teach
个
on
因缘
how
而生的，
the
缘起空性
naturally
就是因缘而发的。
arisen, the
那这样的话
spontaneously
呢，
appeared
那
self
如
is
今呢，就是你在
constant,
这里就是觉
is
性自然，
permanent.
就是觉
But
性
now
自
you're
然也可以
talking
说，或
about
者是觉缘自然
the
嘛，就是你刚才前面
spontaneity
是
of
一个觉缘嘛。如今你在这里呢，就是说这个觉
condition
性，
of
在这里呢
enlightenment,
有个觉性，就是这个觉性呢，我们密法当中
or
经常用
nature
的
of
那个
enlightenment
本觉
as
的这个
spontaneous.
性，就是叫
So
做是根据的
nature
这
of
种
enlightenment
觉悟
in
本体
in
的这种叫做是
Vajrayana
日
teaching,
版
we
日版
usually
叫
would
觉
call
性。
it as
它这里呢
rigpa.
也是有个觉性的词啊，就是有些以前我翻译的时候觉性呢，有些时候是没有这个
In
词，就是
my
但是
translation,
实际上是有这个
when I
词，就
used
是
to
觉性的
translate,
话
I
呢，那这里说是
wasn't sure if there's a
这个
particular term,
就
but
按
as
照
you
问
can
这个
see,
觉性自然跟
this
前面的
particular
觉
sutra
缘自然
translated as
或者说是
the
见
same
性自然，
term
这
as
些都是一个意
rigpa
思，就是那
in
你现在
Chinese
呢，就
language,
是
that is.
说是觉性自然，就是而且呢，就是它是这个
Over
不
here
生
in
不
the
灭
sutra, it
的
says the
啊，就
nature
是
of
非
enlightenment
生
as
不灭的，
spontaneous,
远离一切颠倒这个
as
妄想
neither
颠倒
produced
的
nor
啊，就是虚
extinguished,
妄
and
颠倒
as
的。
apart
那么
from all empty
是非因
falseness
缘
and
就是好
inversion.
像是就是不是
It
这个
seems
因
to
缘
have
的，因为
nothing
你
to do
现
with
在
your
所说这
causes and
个这
conditions
种
or
这
the
个觉性
spontaneity
自然的话呢，就
advocated
是
by
不
the
是因缘
others.
而产生。那这样的话呢，就是外道的这个欲必自然云何开始？
Then
欲
could
必
you
自然，就
please
是刚才
talk
说
about
是不
how
是这个因缘
it
的，
is
然后呢，
different
外道的
than
这个
the
自然呢，就是哈，这是有什么这个
spontaneity
差
that's
别？就是
expounded
请
by
你
the
就是
heretics?
开始啊，
Would you
就是
please
请你这
enlighten
个
us
开
on
始。
this point,
那么让这些
lest
众
us
生呢，就是不入群
should fall
邪，
into
或
deviant
正
path,
世性，妙
thus enabling us
觉
to
明
obtain
心
the
啊，
true
就
mind,
是
the
那
bright
这些
nature
众
of
生的话
wonderful
呢，就是不
enlightenment.
入这个邪道当中，那他
Would
们
you
获得
please
了
give us
真
this
正的这个
teaching?
自我的这
Ananda
种
asked the
这
Buddha,
真
saying
心
that
啊，就是妙明觉
so
性，
that
就
we
是妙
won't
明觉性。
deviant
那
onto
么
the wrong
让他们
path,
真正是得到这样的话，那
so
就是
that we
请
can
这个佛
truly
陀开始。
understand the
那
teaching.
么这个呢，就是我
Could the
们这
Buddha
个下一
please
节课就是
give
佛
us
陀
this
的回答
teaching?
呢，我
Next
们可
class
以
we
就是
will
就是
then
讲
listen
那个下
to
一节
the
课。其实
answer of the Buddha.
在这里的话呢，就是一般这个佛陀呢，就是承认的我也好，承认的这种
The
觉醒的
self
话呢，就是
that's
它是
taught
相
by
而
the
无自性
Buddha
的，就是它没有一
is
个
the
实有
kind
的
of
东
self
西。
that
而这个
appears
外道的话
without
呢，就是
any
不管是
intrinsic
常我也好，生
existence.
我也好，
But
或
when
者
it
说
comes
是
to the
他们自己
heretics,
所承认
let
的，
it
就是
be a
便于
permanent
释放的
self
这
or
种
a
真我的话
purusha,
呢，
the
都是有
cosmic
实有的
being,
东西，就是这个是最关
the
键的。
self
如
that
果我
is
们我们的这个
permeating
如
the
来
ten
藏也好，
directions.
我
They
们的
often
这
talk
种
about
觉
something
性
that
也
is
好，我们的
truly
这个经
existent.
验也好，如果
That
承
is
认一个
really the
实有
key
的话呢，
point to
那就
understand.
是确实
So
是也是
let
是
it
比
be
较
the
比较
Buddha
难的，
nature,
就
let
是
it be Rigpa,
是
let
这
it
样
be
的话
essence
呢，
of seeing. If you were
可
to
能
say
是
that
就
there
是
is
跟外
solid
道就是没有
existence,
什么差别的，但
then
是
your
具体就是
understanding
佛
is
陀
really of no
对
difference
这个
than the
觉性自然
heretics.
跟这个为什么《楞伽经》当中说的这个因缘法
The
三个
teaching
这些道理的话呢，就是
given
应该
in
是
the
这个
Lankavatara
明天
Sutra,
的那个下
where
一
it
节课
talks
当中
about
的话
the
呢，就是
causes and conditions.
会告诉的，因为这个问题
In
呢也
next
是
class,
关
we'll
键的，不
further
然的话
expound on that.
其实是各
This
个宗
point
教
is
都有说
really a
是一
key.
种自然的
Otherwise,
东西呢
if you
变
don't
于世
understand
界。
this point,
如果
then
真的这样
you
的话呢，
would
那我们
see
这
all all religions as the same. You would think that there is something naturally pervading all over the space. Let it be a creator, let it be a God, let it be a permanent existent self, Brahma. There is really no difference. In the wish-fulfilling treachery, when we talk about all the manifestation that's manifested out of Vairochana Buddha, in fact, our view that is of the biggest difference than that of the heretics is that we do not come to the recognition of Vairochana Buddha is a truly existent thing or truly existent being. If we were to take Vairochana Buddha and all his manifestations as truly existent and start to investigate to when he started to make it and when it ended and so on, would be extremely difficult to establish. This is quite a key to understand. The later teaching that's given by the Buddha, I can't quite remember the angle of his answer, but later we will look into it. But I think the key of that answer is there is no truly existent, there's nothing that's truly existent in its nature. According to the other heretics school, they would come to something that is truly existent. So let's look into this teaching in next class.